Hello and welcome to Lewis Nichols Live Stories in association with Mr. Shane Solomon. And this one I'm really excited about because I think the word legend is overused. But in your case, Christopher Biggins, it's very apt. So thank you so much for coming down.
Lewis, it's my pleasure.
Thank you. How was the flight coming to Cornwall?
Excellent flight. I mean, really, really good. I've done it before. And I think there was a time when they sort of cancelled during the winter months, and it didn't happen regularly. But I was pleased to see it was very regular, and we had two wonderful girls, one Cornish girl and one girl from Aberdeen serving us, and they were both gorgeous, so it was lovely.
And you've seen the Cornish cows on your way in?
The Cornish cows, which are lovely, black and white they were, very nice indeed, and I love them.
I love the accent.
It was more Wiltshire, I think, than I don't want to get. I could probably get put into prison, I think, down here for that accent. Anyway,
I kind of want to go through, where it all started for you to where you're at now. So, growing up, did you always want to perform, and did you have a love for the arts?
Well, I was very lucky because I was born in Oldham, which was my father's hometown, and my mother was a Hampshire hog. And so she was more Salisbury, Southampton area. And we went up there, and I was born in December the 16th. And I was a very weak child, and I had pneumonia, and my mother hated Oldham with a passion. So we packed, after 3 weeks old, I think I was, we packed up, and she put me in a cot, wrapped in cotton wool, and I still have an aversion to cotton wool to this day. And we came down in a Pickford's lorry to Salisbury, and they bought a little house, I think for something like £2,000 or £3,000, and they couldn't afford the mortgage, so they had to sell it. So we moved into a caravan, and we started off life very, very simply. And we had a house eventually, which they rented, and it had, I remember vividly, it had a outside loo, and I was terrified of going to the toilet. I couldn't bear it. It was so frightening. And then Monday evenings, my mother would put the boiler on, and we'd bring the tin bath in, and I'd bath in front of the fire. And I think she probably got into it after me. And my father, who came in much later, probably got into it as well. So it was a great family thing. And I was an only child. And until I was 18 years old. And by this time, when I left school at 16 and a half, I'd gone to a drama school, I'd gone to a Salisbury Rep, which was a brilliant repertory company. And I was 2 years there. But when I was at ordinary school, and my parents really worked very hard and saved up to send me to a private school, and there was a woman called Mrs. Christian who taught me elocution, because my great auntie Vi was a real snob, and she hated that all the family talked like that. She really, she couldn't bear it. So I had elocution lessons, and Mrs. Christian got me involved in theatre. And she must have seen something in me, encouraged me, and then, as I said, I went to Salisbury Rep, had 2 years there. Went for 2 weeks, and I stayed for 2 years. And then I went to drama school. There was a woman called Stephanie Cole, very famous actress.
Yes, open all hours?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And she said, you must go to Bristol. I went to Bristol Vic School, and then I left Bristol Vic School and came and lived in London. And the rest is history. I mean, I was very lucky. There was two actors who were married called Jonathan Cecil and Vivian Heilbronn. And they had a beautiful house in Chelsea, and I had 2 rooms in it for £4 a week. So they gave me the style to which I became so very readily accustomed.
So it was literally always the arts. It wasn't kind of between something else. Did you know that I wanted to be on the stage, I wanted to perform?
Well, I must have done. I never really thought of it like that. I mean, I suppose I must have done subconsciously. I mean, my father and mother put up with me doing theatricals, and they loved coming to see plays at Salisbury Rep. And I loved doing props, which was one of the things I did when I was there. And they would often come and see a production where half their house furnishing was on stage, because it was easier for me to go and take all their stuff. And then when I went to drama school, they were thrilled by that. Then when I left drama school to go and live in London, they said to me, my father said, no, come on, he was in the car business, sold and repaired cars. He said, come on, you'll have a house of your own and you'll get a nice living and do that. And I said, no, I want to try this acting thing. And so I did, and they let me alone. I think I mentioned it before. When I was 18 years old and leaving home, my mother said to me, she said, by the way, Christopher, she said, I'm pregnant. And I said, don't be so stupid. I was appalled because I was an only child. I thought, the same mother, same father. And Robin Ellis, who I later met down in Cornwall, in Poldark, he had a party and my father had sold him a car. So they invited them to the party and they got a bit squiffy and went back and did the business. Paul is, I've got a brother who's 18 years younger than me, who's not like a brother, he's a friend. And he's a lovely boy called Sean. But it was hysterical because I was absolutely, I didn't think that, I know differently now, of course. Age, it never stops anything.
Obviously, we know you've starred in so many iconic shows, especially in television, some of the all-time greats, Upstairs, Downstairs. So where did that transition of television come from? Because, it started quite early on.
It did. I came to London to do a stage show called The Owl and the Pussycat, went to see SEE ... as opposed to SEA. And David wrote it, this wonderful children's writer, David Wood. And I came to London for that when I was 21 years old. And then I started to get parts in, the Doctor series, Doctor at Sea and all various, some others do have them, all these wonderful things. And it was great. And then it started from there, really, and then I think the first big thing where people, I know, started to recognize me because I used to have convertible cars. And I was sitting in my BMW convertible at traffic lights, and I'd just done a series called Porridge, in which I played lukewarm. And a man in a huge lorry looked down at me and said, hello, lukewarm, how are you? And I said, I'm very well, thank you. So that really made me think to myself, well, yes, I'm now being established from that. And of course, it was a wonderful TV series. Ronnie Barker was fantastic. And I always say about Ronnie Barker, he wasn't a comedian. He was a comedy actor. And by that, I mean that he would, if one of Dick Clement and Ian Lafrene's lines, who wrote Porridge, was said by him, but he felt would be better said by me, he had the generosity to give me that line. And that's what makes a great comedy actor. Whereas comedians take all the funny lines themselves and nobody else gets a look in. And that is very negative. And it's very rare to get someone who sees the whole thing as a great possibility. And of course, Porridge was wonderful.
See, with Ronnie Barker, I've seen lots of interviews with people that have worked with him, and they talk about him and his comedy mind as being second to none. And no one that has worked with Ronnie has said they've met anyone like him since. So what was your favourite memory with him? Because, you think of Arkwright, he's done so many different things, but what was your favourite memory?
Well, I think one of the greatest things ever is when he was with Ronnie Corbett and the two Ronnies. And when they did the priceless sketch, Four Candles, which I believe he wrote. That was how clever he was. He was a brilliant writer, and he knew what it was all about. And he was quite a shy man, which was very interesting. He would be great fun in rehearsals, but he would arrive at the rehearsal rooms and he would keep himself to himself. And then he would, love a good laugh and have you. But he would always, when we finished a week's rehearsal, he would come with us to have a drink. And the other thing I remember, which I think is brilliant, and I always try and do myself, when you're recording a big series like Porridge, a comedy series, and everybody is nervous because you have a live audience. So you rehearse Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Saturday, you go into the studio, you do a rehearsal, and Saturday night, you record it, or Sunday.
Wow.
It's no time at all, but he would always fuck up. And make people laugh because he made a mistake. And that what was so brilliant about him. I mean, he was really, really clever. So then everybody, when he mucked up, everybody relaxed. And they knew that they were onto a winner because, he'd done it, and we could all then get on with the business of doing the show.
So that's interesting you say that, because I've seen an interview with Sir David Jason, and he said that he would do that on the live filming of Only Fools and Horses to help relax some of the other cast. So do you reckon he may have got that from Ronnie?
I think he absolutely did. I certainly got it from Ronnie. Yeah. And it is marvellous to be able to do that. Because then, people think, if you're perfect, then I think people lose all recognition of how great you are. Yeah. And I think then he's good. I mustn't try, so you become nervous. But because the star of the show has dried and forgotten his lines purposely, you didn't know it was purposely, but it was purposely, then you relax more.
Well, talking of Sir David Jason, of course, you worked together on Porridge and you had your scenes together. What was he like to work with? Because he's another comedy icon.
Well, he was brilliant, truly wonderful. I mean, it's so funny because comedy, is very, very difficult. Drama is much, much easier. Comedy is really difficult. It's tuning into the atmosphere, knowing when to bring the punchline in. It's really difficult. And David, was just brilliant at it, as Ronnie was, as was Richard Beckinsale. And it was really sad when he died at such a young age, because he was a brilliant comic actor again and would have been a huge star in America if he'd lived.
Did you, when with Sir David, obviously he's very young, he played a much older character, but he was really young. Did you know at that time he's going to be a star? Because he went on, obviously, to do so much. But Porridge was kind of his big break.
The answer to that is no. And I think I can almost use that again by telling you that nobody knows what is going to be a success. I mean, when we made Porridge, none of us, Porridge, extraordinary series, a series about men in prison.
Yeah.
What were we in there for? I mean, we couldn't have been, we were likable characters. We weren't murderers or paedophiles or anything strange, but we didn't know quite what we were in there for. And so the thing is, none of us knew that, I think of everything that I've ever done, we've never thought to ourselves, this is going to be the big one. And I've done so many shows like that. The Rocky Horror Picture Show, for instance. When it opened, we had a great fun time making it. But when it opened, it was a failure. It was a flop. And it was only when it went to America and they started to interact with it, the audience, that it became one of the most classic and important films that Britain's ever made.
We're going to go on to that because that is, like you said, iconic. But you mentioned Porridge, that's when people started to recognise you, and the show was huge. So did your life change in the sense of the fame? Because you'd done a lot beforehand, but this seemed to really catapult you to the public.
Yeah, I think it was an extraordinary thing because it did, people suddenly, and fees went up. We did that in 1974. So I think this year it's 50 years old.
Wow.
In fact, any minute now, the post office are bringing out a Porridge stamp, a collection of stamps, which I feature on one of them.
Oh, what a moment.
A real moment, a really marvellous moment, because as I say, 50 years. I think it really did do all sorts of things. In 1974, I was on £90 an episode. And when it got shown, when it was repeated on BBC One or BBC Two, I used to get something like £1,500. So what Ronnie was getting, goodness knows, because he was a huge star. But then, unfortunately, the BBC, in their own judgment, sold all the comedy shows to Gold, which we earn no money at all. I get checks for 15 pence.
Really?
Yeah, it really angers all of us. Because it's very rarely now repeated on BBC One or BBC Two. It's always constantly on those satellite channels, and we get nothing.
You get 15, so, because I see it all the time. Yeah. It's constantly on. That's bizarre.
It is bizarre, and it's very unfair. If you, for instance, a great friend of mine was B. Arthur, And B. Arthur was the Golden Girls. Did you ever watch the Golden Girls? Well, you should watch the Golden Girls because it's a fantastic American series about 4 women living together. And the main character is this woman called B. Arthur, who's very masculine. She talks like that, and she is incredible. She did a series called Maude in America, and she owned the series. So she was a multi-millionaires, because wherever it's shown to this day, checks come flooding in. And my friend Joan Collins, of course, who did Dynasty, gets very upset because, of course, she desperately wanted repeats, but they would never give them. So she did very well. I mean, she earned a lot of money, but she could have been absolutely a multi-millionaires now if she'd owned or got repeats.
I can't believe that. The 15p thing has shocked me.
No, it's ridiculous. I mean, what do you do with a check for 15p? Bank it.
Obviously, we spoke about this briefly in the car, and you're returning to Cornwall, where, of course, you filmed the original Poldark, and you played the vicar, a bit of a seedy.
Well, yes, he was called Ozzie Whitworth, and he was a sex-crazed vicar. And I loved him to death. I mean, Winston Graham, who became a very good friend through that series, who was a wonderful writer and adored Cornwall, had a house down here, always came down with his family. It was just wonderful. And this character he wrote was unbelievable. Now, I got that part, and this goes to show what happens in a career. I did a series called I, Claudius, playing Nero.
Oh, yes.
And the day it was transmitted, and I think I was, if anything, I think it's probably the best role I've ever done. And I certainly was thrilled to be doing it. And the night it was transmitted, the producer of Poldark rang the producer of I, Claudius and said, "What's this Biggins like?" And he gave me a very good review. And he immediately offered me the part of Ozzie Whitworth. And I loved playing Ozzie Whitworth. And in fact, there's a wonderful, my wife, played by Jane Wymark, was heavily pregnant. And the doctor remember it was a period piece, the doctor said to me, "I'm afraid you must stop conjugal rights with your wife. Now she's pregnant because you're too heavy." And I went, "Heavy?" in disbelief. So I stopped. And of course, he was so hideous that he started to have an affair with her sister, played by Julie Dawn Cole. And Winston wrote a scene where I had to make love to her feet. So all week in rehearsals in the BBC in London, she went to Dr. Scholl's every day, Julie. And we filmed in Pebble Mill, and we got to the studios, and the scene came, and she had to be carried onto the set, placed in the bed. And on action, there was a close-up of her foot. And on action, my tongue came between 2 toes. And the head of drama at the time said no way could he put it out on a Sunday night after Dad's Army. So it was cut.
But you still had to do it.
I still had to. Oh, I loved it. Oh, give me a toe any day.
With, the I, Claudius that you just mentioned, didn't you get that role based on an advert that you were on?
Not really, but interestingly enough, there was talk of me doing I, Claudius. And prior to that, I was asked to do a commercial for Heineken Lager, playing Nero. And I couldn't turn it down because I was going to earn a fortune on repeats. And I thought, will this upset, the BBC if I do this? But anyway, I thought, no, I've got to do it because it was a lot of money. And so it was a scene they built. It was the biggest set they've ever built for a commercial ever. It was the corner of the Colosseum. And there was the royal box, and I was in it surrounded by beautiful women and beautiful men. And my thumb was on a stand like that. And down in the arena, there was a man, 2 men, and one had a spear at the other one, and they was waiting for the thumbs up or thumbs down for death, or should he live? So I couldn't do anything with my thumb, so I called for Heineken Lager, and they bring Heineken Lager in, and I take a sip, and my thumb starts to twitch like that. And I have to take another sip, and eventually it goes right up like that, and I walk forward, and I do that. And it was going to be huge. We were going to make hundreds of thousands of pounds. It was going to be fantastic. When it went out, it went on television and it was brought off within 24 hours because they said you can't advertise beer on the death of Christians.
Oh, right. Okay.
No one had thought about the ending. And we could have so easily done an alternative ending.
Yeah.
But no one thought of it. And so I didn't earn thousands and hundreds of thousands of pounds.
So from having to work with toes and then Heineken,
I've done everything. And we haven't even got to Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Going back to Poldark, when they announced the show was coming back and they were doing a revival, what were your thoughts on that? Were you excited to see what they were going to do?
Yes, I was. And I think they did a very good job. And I thought the new Robin Ellis was very attractive and he's a lovely man. And the character who I played was played by a wonderful actor. And he was apparently very nervous because I have to say that I was bloody good in that role. And he was voted the most hated man by the Daily Mail that year. And so I made a good impact with it. But I met him and he was a lovely man. And I think he was pleased that I was nice to him and said nice things. And it was great. And he was very good. Not as good as me, but...
I'd agree.
But I love doing it. I love the whole thing. And, I had a lot of friends, and Ang Harrod Rees, who sadly is no longer with us, was a wonderful Demelza, and Julie Dawn Cole, as I've just said. It was a wonderful series, and we really had a ball making it. It was such fun.
You really have done everything. We've spoke about the comedy, the dramas, but then children's TV came calling for you, and you worked on so many series, Rent a Ghost and so many more. So how did you feel about that? Because that was kind of a different thing for you, really. You've done these legendary TV shows, some serious dramas, and now children's TV.
Well, Rent a Ghost was fabulous, and the producer and director was one of my best friends, who still is one of my best friends, Jeremy Swan, and who's the funniest man I've ever met, a wonderful Irishman. And so I was thrilled to be able to do that. And there was a wonderful cast. Miss Popoff. Do you remember this series? Miss Popoff was played by an actress who is recently been in Coronation Street. And she is a fantastic actress. But the original Miss Popoff, you wouldn't know because she left the show. And her name was Linda Marshall. Now, Linda Marshall went on to changed her name to Linda LaPlante.
Wow.
And she wrote all those wonderful crime novels and is now an absolutely incredible writer. And she's still a very good friend of mine, absolutely wonderful. And Sue Nichols had taken over from, and she's now in Coronation Street. But there's a wonderful thing because Linda LaPlante used to go to when she left the series, she used to go to all these big conventions for crime writing. And she'd talk for about an hour, and then they'd take questions from the room. And one of the questions, usually always the first question was, what was it like making Rent a Ghost? And she wasn't happy by that.
Really?
No, because that was her past.
Yeah.
Now she was a serious writer, but everybody, and still to this day, someone at the airport said to me, "Oh, we used to love you in Rent a Ghost." It was a wonderful. I don't think children's television is anything like it used to be. And I had another series which took me in that. I always think that was an acting role. That was definitely an acting role. Mad, but acting. Whereas when I did On Safari, that was more of a personality thing. And I was able to say to the producers, I want a Girl Friday in this. And I just worked with the talented Gillian Tailforth. Yeah. And so she was one of the funniest people I'd ever met. Really witty and funny and gags all the time. And so I got her and she was just brilliant. So we did that and it was amazing. We used to get the most incredible stars, including Kenneth Williams, who used to come along and do things. And it was wonderful. And,
successful as well. You had 4 series of that.
Yeah, I know. It was really successful. So it was good.
I was thinking, you've got so many friends because you said, they're still good for your phone book must be like the Yellow Pages because you know everybody in the industry.
Well, I've been very lucky to meet lots of people, and I Joan Collins, who is one of my best friends who is extraordinary. And I stayed with her in America. In fact, there's a wonderful story I'll tell you. She had some friends called Marvin and Barbara Davis, and he was a multi-billionaire. And his money came from oil. But he owned Paramount Studios. He was that rich, which was a big successful thing. Anyway, they were a lovely couple. She was as mad as a hatter, and he was very clever and brilliant. So one day I'm staying with Joan in Los Angeles, and I get a phone call, and Joan says, "For you." So it's Barbara Davis. She said, Christopher, she said, "Is Barbara here? We're having a 92nd birthday party for George Burns." Now, you're looking a little who is George Burns. George Burns was an amazing comedian who smoked a cigar and was very, very famous, really famous. And so I said, "Oh, really?" She said, "And we'd like you to come." So I said, "I'd love to come myself." So I went, and it was held in the foyer of their house. And there were 400 of us.
Wow.
Sitting at table. You've never seen a foyer
How
like it.
big is the house?
Oh, the house was huge. And there was the Joan Collins table. There was the Jackie Collins table. There was the Michael Caine table. There was the Sidney Poitier table. I mean, every table had someone famous. My table was myself, then Shakira Caine, who I knew really well, Frank Sinatra, our hostess, George Burns' 92nd birthday party, one of her hostess's children, and then another guy, and then Dan Aykroyd. And Dan Aykroyd said to me, "Pinch yourself, Biggins. You don't often get nights like this." Well, no, George Burns was fantastic, but I was sitting one seat away from Frank Sinatra.
Yeah.
I thought, if my mother could see me now, I mean, this is unbelievable. So I called him Sir, and I called him Mr. Frank, and I called him Mr. Sinatra. And eventually he said to me, "Biggins, call me Frank." So I thought, I can't let this moment go by. So I said, "Frank, about 9 years ago in London, I played Nathan Detroit in Guys and Dolls." And he said, "Do you know, Christopher, so did I." And I thought, that's it. I can die now and go to heaven. And then after dinner, he said to me, when I go out in the corridor with him, and I thought, well, he's going to shoot me because he was a well-known mafia man. Anyway, he went out, we had a chat, and he wanted to have a cigarette. And his wife didn't allow him to smoke, so I had to guard where we were, make sure he got a cigarette. But we talked, and I thought, this is unbelievable. But Joan is extraordinary because she's such a star. And, we've been in restaurants in Los Angeles and in London. And suddenly, incredible stars come across the room to talk to you. Spartacus one day came across, and we had this conversation with him. I mean, you just cannot believe the people that another wonderful story. We're out shopping, and we bump in Los Angeles. We bump into Tina Turner, wow. And Tina Turner goes, "Joan." Joan goes, "Tina," and this is my friend Biggins, and then we chat, and it's wonderful, marvelous. And at the end of the chat, she leaves, Tina, and we carry on shopping. I said, "How do you know Tina?" She said, "I've never met her before in my life." And that sums up LA. Everybody doesn't know anybody, but they all know each other. And that happens time and time again. That was Kirk Douglas, by the way, Spartacus.
Kirk Douglas. That's such Michael Caine, Frank Sinatra. I'm trying to picture this for you. What's your funniest memory with Joan? Because you two have such a good friendship. So what's the kind of funniest thing that always jumps out as...
There's a wonderful story. I was writing an article for the Daily Mail, and it was called My Favorite Women, and I had to have 5 women that I loved. And of course, I included Joan. And I wrote in the most lovely way because I spent a lot of time in the south of France. She has a lovely house down there. And I said, "I've seen Joan come down in the morning with no wig, no makeup, looking fantastic in real life." And which I thought was fine. It was a very, very nice little piece. Then when the piece came out, the headline was, "I've seen Joan Collins without wig and makeup," in the biggest print you've ever seen. Well, she was furious. And she didn't speak to me for 3 months. And she came back from LA and she rang and she said, "Biggins," she said, "it's your friend with no wig and makeup. Do you want lunch?" And, it was fantastic.
Your impressions are so spot on. I can't get over it. Every time you've impersonated someone, they're so accurate. Because I love Benidorm, and of course, Joan was in Benidorm.
Oh, yeah, she was wonderful.
Yeah. One question I wanted to ask you. You've appeared in so many legendary shows, but if there was a show that you haven't appeared on that you wish you could have, what would it have been?
Do you know, I can't think of anything. I couldn't do, soaps are so interesting. I mean, I used to, as a child and a young man, I used to watch a lot of soaps, Coronation Street mainly. I suppose I'd quite like to be in a Coronation, but I couldn't do it now because I couldn't learn the lines. I mean, it's something as you get older that you can't do. I can only just manage to do pantomime again. But I mean, that's sort of, you make it up as you go along, really. But I mean, I can't think of anything that I really would have liked to have done. I've done so much and I'm thrilled with what I've done that I'm very happy.
I'd have loved you to have been in Keeping Up Appearances. Yeah. I think you and Patricia Routledge would have had such a good chemistry on screen.
Patricia Routledge, who I know is a wonderful, and she was so brilliant in that. Yeah. I mean, that was a classic TV series. I mean, you see that in those days when we were doing Porridge and we were doing Some Mothers Do Have 'Em, which I love because Michael Crawford had a bad reputation, Michael, because people used to say, oh, he was very difficult and tricky, but he wasn't. He was a perfectionist. And if you didn't live up to his standards, he was difficult.
Yeah.
And that is not being a difficult person. That is because he wants the show to be the best ever. But no, I can't think of anything. I've done so many varied things. I mean, working on Surprise, Surprise with Cilla Black.
Well, that's the next thing, because that was incredible, because it was something so different.
I know.
And it hadn't been done before, It was so fresh, it was energetic. And the late Cilla, a good friend of yours, how did you two meet and how did your involvement in that series actually come about?
Well, I was doing pantomime in Newcastle and playing the dame. And one day I had a meeting with Alan Boyd, who was head of light entertainment at London Weekend. And he came out to see the pantomime and took me out for dinner. And he said, look, we're doing a new series for Saturday night or Sunday night. Big, he said, big ITV series. And it's very much you and the public and your co-presenter, and it will be quite fantastic. And we'll do all sorts of extraordinary things, and it's going to be huge. And I said, oh, and we'd like you to do it. So I said, oh. And at the end, he said, you haven't asked who the other star is. And I said, of course, who is the other star? And they said, Cilla Black. And I went, Cilla Black? I mean, I just admired her so much from everything. And I saw the show she did with Terry Wogan, where she'd been almost retired and she had 3 boys and she was coming out of retirement. And it was there that they saw her and thought we must do something with her. And so we did this thing together. So we met on the first day of rehearsal and we just clicked. I mean, there was instant rapport between the two of us. And that stayed forever. I mean, I just adored making the series. It was wonderful. She had to have a new dress every week. So consequently, I had to have a new suit. And I went to all incredible tailors in London, Doug Hayward, and new shoes, brand new shoes made for me. Shirts from Turban and Assa. I mean, it just went on and on and on. It was like and we had our own chauffeurs. Those things don't happen. They happen to Ant and Dec, but few people get that sort of. Probably Amanda Holden and the gang who do
Britain's Got Talent.
Britain's Got Talent, but it doesn't happen nowadays. It's turn up in whatever you're going to wear, and that's what you get. But it was fantastic days, and then we became very good friends. And tragically, Bobby died, and I remember we went over, Neil, my partner, myself, to see her, and she was distraught, as you can imagine. And that night, we'd gone home, and I got a phone call about midnight. She was in floods of tears. And I said, what's the matter? She said, well, I don't know how to feed the dogs, because he did everything for her. We used to go out, and he would always pick up the bill. So when after he died, there was a space of time, like say 3 months. And I said, right, go out. And so we got a group of friends to go together. And she said, now, here's my credit card. I said, what do you mean your credit card? I said, well, to pay for the dinner tonight. I said, no, we all go Dutch. She said, what's Dutch? And I said, you pay for yourself. No, Bobby would hate that. No, we can't do that. I said, that's where it works. And so she accepted that, and she's so dependent on him. He did everything. She never carried money. He was always there with the credit card or cash, and they were devoted to each other, and it was tragic. And of course, she got over that, and she became, Cilla, as we know it. Blind date happened, all the most wonderful things. And we still were good friends. I used to go and stay with her and Paul O'Grady in her house in Spain. And we had the most wonderful times. And I was driving to the Ivy restaurant in West Street for Sunday lunch. And the news came through on my car radio that she had died. And I had to pull over, and I just sobbed and sobbed and sobbed and sobbed, because I couldn't believe that someone so close to me and so famous had died. I mean, it was tragic. And she died, I think when she was 70, I think very young. And it was just awful. And we had a wonderful funeral for her in Liverpool, and Paul and I drove from the hotel to the church, and the streets were lined with thousands of people, and it was like going to a royal funeral. It was extraordinary. She was so loved, and she still is loved.
You can see the emotion when you talk about Cilla, and that's nice because it shows how close you were.
Well, she was extraordinary. We did so many wonderful, and the laughs we had.
Any stories? Because I can imagine you two would have had some fun moments.
There were so many stories. I can't think of anything now that comes to mind. It's just that we just had the same sense of humor, and we giggled and laughed, and there were wonderful, like for instance, an experience we had because the first 3 episodes of Surprise, Surprise was live. And there was a wonderful moment where a man wanted to propose to his girlfriend live on television. And so it's very similar to here. You're Cilla. Hello, Cilla. I'm Biggins. And Cilla had the man next to her over there, and I had the woman here. And so Cilla said, you've got something to say. And he came over to me, or rather to the wife, knelt in front of her to the girlfriend, opened a box and said, will you marry me? And the audience went wild. And after they calmed down, she said, no. And I went, what? I said, go on. Go on, marry him. And she said, no. And this was a live show.
Wow.
And no one had said or checked that she wanted to get married to him.
What was the reason for her saying no?
We never knew, but we had to then move on very quickly to the next item. But it was also, live television is the best. It is just because extraordinary things can happen, and they can be good and they can be bad. This was a particularly bad one, but it keeps you on your toes, and it's just, I still to this day, live television is the best.
I was really hoping when you were talking about Cilla that you were going to do an impersonation, because I was thinking, right, this is going to be good.
Chuck.
So, surprise, surprise, you two, like you said, the chemistry was there. So how come you didn't do the series longer? Because
I tell you, the real. I tell you, the story that went out when we did it was that I wanted to move on, and which wasn't true at all. What happened was that Cilla was a huge star, and Bobby wanted it to be Cilla's Surprise, Surprise. But contractually, it was always, whenever Cilla's name was mentioned, I had to be mentioned. It was a real tight contract. And if they said to me, would you mind if it was Cilla's Surprise, Surprise with Biggins? I would have said yes, but they never asked me that. And so it was an unfortunate thing. And obviously, I regret it because A, I loved her, and B, I was being paid a lot of money. Not as much as her, but it was a very nice contract. But, things happened and we moved on, and, other things happened, like The Jungle and things like that. So which I'm sure you're going to come to. But no,
I definitely am.
It was a wonderful experience, and I loved it. And it was a shame that I didn't stay with it.
Have you ever said no to a show that you've later regretted? where you think, oh, I wish I did that?
I wish I'd said no to Big Brother, because that was a horrible experience. And I was, unbeknownst to me, I was favourite to win that because I'd done the jungle and I was in this one. So I was, and they wanted a boy who, oh God, because he's a horrible man, who was in a show for Channel 5, which was Sex on the Beach or something.
Not Stephen Burr.
Stephen Burr, yes. And of course, he's in prison, I think, still, because of the incident with the girlfriend that he had, who he then put all these terrible pictures of, videos. And he was a horrible person. And they wanted him to win, to promote the series that they were doing. And so they got rid of me. And it was very unceremonious the way they did it. And I remember going home after being evicted, and I was in a sort of stunned mood. I couldn't believe what was happening. And I went home, and luckily Neil was there, and he was marvellous and able to help the situation enormously. And then I was on my computer, and there was an email from a man called Evgeny Lebedev, who is a Russian, and he owned the Evening Standard and the I newspaper. And he said, I got your email address, he said, and you've been treated so appallingly by the Big Brother that I'd love you to come next weekend to my house in Italy. And if you get to Northolt Aerodrome outside London, my jet will pick you up and take, well, I mean, suddenly talk about, being as down as I could possibly be, and then suddenly invited by this unbelievable Russian man who's a great friend now. I met him once, I think, before. But anyway, he was so nice. And the response from all my friends was universal. So it was fantastic. But it was, at that particular, there was like 4 or 5 hours of real depression.
Well, this is the thing. So for those people who are watching who don't know, Big Brother removed you from the house. They felt that some comments were made that were deemed anti-Semitic and even homophobic. But the bit that got me was in previous series before and after yours, people had made comments and weren't removed from the house. And when I always remember watching you so innocently going into that diary room and being told, and my heart went out for you. And I thought, like everybody else, I saw the response on Twitter, you were treated absolutely appallingly on that. And I don't understand why you were removed, because people had said worse. No, I know. Much worse. And it didn't make sense. Did you worry at that point when you heard you are leaving to the door to your right? Did you worry, oh, I've had the most illustrious career. Is this going to be it now? No, it never occurred to me that. But funny enough, I did think it 2 days later. I thought, what's going to happen? But the response from everybody, all my, people in the business who I respected, and everybody, the public especially, were absolutely outraged by it. And so that gave me the confidence to go on. And I think what they thought, the producers of the Big Brother Channel 5, they thought I was the one person that could sustain whatever happened. They knew I'd come back. And luckily I did, but it was pretty nerve-wracking at the time. Did they ever check up on you or reach out and say, are you okay? How are you dealing with this? Because, I mean, it was the headlines at the time. I remember Biggins kicked out of Big Brother. It was so big. And I couldn't imagine what that's like to be involved in that, because it was huge. No, and interestingly enough, too, a very good question you've asked there. When you go into something like the Big Brother or even the jungle, that you have to go through a psychiatrist and you have to talk to them. But no one came to see me. Actually, that's not quite a lie. There was a wonderful guy who was one of the psychiatrists on Big Brother, and he did ring me and say, look, I can't believe I said you can't do this to the producers. And they did it, and because they wanted their way to get me out so I wouldn't win. But he said, I want you to know that you are totally innocent of anything and you should not. And he did say that. So that gave me a bit of courage. Genuinely, that was one of those times I'm a big Big Brother fan, and there's been 2 moments in the history of the show that I found so uncomfortable. And that was one of them, because I thought, you deserve so much better. And to see someone that people look up to, an icon, a legend, to have an entrance at the back door wasn't acceptable. No, I mean, I was shocked at the time. I was just numb. I was totally numb. I couldn't believe it. And I wasn't even allowed back in to get my stuff. Yeah. That came on later. But I mean, it was
they knew that they wanted that boy to win. And I'm so pleased he's in jail now.
He is not a nice guy, Stephen
No.
Bear. You know, when the other housemates so you'd obviously formed some really good bonds in there. So when some of these people were evicted, did they reach out to you and say, you know, I can't believe this happened to you. Are you okay? You know, some of the friends you met.
Yes, they did. They did.
Yeah.
Some of the good people did. But, you know, and also, you know, the Jewish thing was bizarre because there was a Jewish girl there, and I can't remember her name, she was what can I call her?
Gemma. I don't know about Gemma.
I can't remember. She was Jewish and she wanted desperately to win. And I think she thought one of the ways was saying that I'd said terrible anti-Jewish things. Well, I have so many Jewish friends, all of who stood by me, like Miriam Margolyes, Maureen Littman. They all wrote letters and, you know, it was incredible what people did. And, you know, because it was just unspeakable what they were trying to, you know, they I think paid badly in the end. For that.
I mean, it didn't last very long after that.
Certainly not. Certainly not.
Your personality, you're so infectious, and you have this way and ability to just, almost like a battery, you charge people up, you make people feel happy. I mean, being in a car with you today with Shane, it's just kind of, you sit back and you enjoy. And that's in your career, people started to realize this. And we had all known you from some of these really good serious dramas, comedy shows, but then you became more of a personality. Did that ever frustrate you at any point in the sense of, you know, I was doing all these serious shows, but now I'm more of a presenter? Did that ever frustrate you?
No, because I actually loved the presenting and I loved, you know, being a personality. I mean, it was wonderful. And also, you know, I was earning a lot of money. It was really, really good. You know, so I had a good lifestyle. I mean, I was able, after the jungle, to buy my house, which I still live in to this day. So it's very good to me. And I now love all of that. I mean, I've always done pantomime. I've been doing pantomime now for over 50 years.
Wow.
And I'm doing it again this year. I've got fantastic producers who really look after me. And last year I was in Southampton and I played the man in the mirror. And they said, do this, it'll be wonderful. Because what they did, they had this amazing mirror made and they flew me in. And then I would do a few words and then I would be flown out again. And that happened all the way through the show. And then in the second half, I would come on and I would do a pantomime dame sketch for about 8 minutes. And I used to go through 8 different costumes and the audience loved it, ending up with a red swimsuit like Pamela Anderson wore. And it used to bring the house down in a blonde wig like she had. And the audience couldn't believe it. It was the biggest laugh I think I've ever had on stage. And so that was wonderful. And it's good, you know, because so, you know, it would be difficult for me at the age of 76, which I am this Christmas, to be able to go on and play because it's very exhausting.
Yeah,
it's 2 shows a day, you know, 6 days a week, 12 performances is a lot. So they're really looking after me, which is good.
I mean, talking about personality, I'm a huge fan of Bad Girls. Love the show. And lucky enough, I reunited the cast a couple of years ago. And we obviously spoke about you because you were on the show as yourself. So when Shed Productions came and spoke to you about this and said, we've got an idea, what were your thoughts? Because this show was huge.
I thought, well, I'm a bit like you. I love the show. I mean, I thought that, and there were quite a few people I knew in it, a few girls. And I jumped to the chance because I thought it was fantastic. Because, of course, to remind your viewers, it was I go there as a personality to open part of the prison, and they capture me, and keep me there under false pretenses, and so to get the publicity. And of course, I get to know the girls really well, and there were some wonderful scenes, and it was just magical. And it's one of the things I really, really keep very much to my heart. It was wonderful.
Well, I was lucky enough, like I said, I reunited and we had, I know, a good friend of yours, Vicky.
Yes.
Yeah, Vicky Alcock. And it was so good because it was so dramatic. And then you ended up being all pally with them after being kidnapped.
Yes.
What a moment. But let's go back to 2007 and I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, because that felt like a rebirth in the sense of a new audience and a younger audience fell in love with you. You know, people that maybe didn't know you before were like, because I've discovered you from I'm a Celebrity, and I thought this guy is hilarious, absolutely hilarious. So first of all, what made you say yes to the show? Because you would have seen it before, and it's not the easiest show to do.
No, it's not. I mean, Ant and Dec, who I'd worked a lot with on their Saturday night shows and things like that, I was always on their wish list to do it. And one year, I don't know why, I had decided not to do pantomime because it was always coincided with pantomime. So I could never do it. But they asked me in January, I think, to do it in November. And I thought, why not? So I'll do it. And I can't say I did it for the money because I did. It was £50,000, I think. And nowadays they, £1 million or £1.5 million they pay some people, which is ridiculous. But anyway, I did it, and people say to me, "You had the most illustrious, fantastic career. What is the best thing you've ever done?" And my answer is, and it may shock people, I'm a celebrity, get me out of here. Now, the reason I say that is I won it.
Yep.
I am the king of the jungle that year. And you're voted in by the public. What more of an accolade could you want? There was something that the public, and still to this day, which is, what year was it?
2007.
2007. So how many years ago is that?
We are coming up to
24.
Yeah. No. 10, 16, 18.
18. And still people come up to me and say, "We loved you." I mean, that really did change my career again.
You were so funny. And we spoke earlier, the bit, and I still watch it on YouTube because it gets me. You're on the hammock and you think, and you shout, you make this noise, you wake up
Richardson
next to you, and then you think there's something of it, but you reassure yourself, no, it isn't. And then the moment that you discover that there's a rat on you, you jump out, make this noise. And I think that's the moment where people said, "You're our king of the jungle."
I think also there's another moment that I did, which was, we were playing a game and I said, we were playing charades. And I said, "All right, I've got one for you." So I went.
Book. Film. 2 words. First word. Syllable.
First syllable. Good.
Cock. Balls. Second syllable. Boobs. Breasts. Nipples.
It's nothing. I just want to hear you talk dirty. And when I did that, I mean, the group, the people in that year, I absolutely fell about. And I thought to myself, well, they'll never put that out on television. And of course they did.
I don't remember that. I've just played along.
Well, I mean, it was a real, and I believe that and the rats was the thing that won it for me, because it was just brilliant. And some of the people, oh God, what's the name? Keris Matthews cried with laughter. I mean, people were on the floor with laughter.
That's brilliant.
And you could feel bushes, because the cameramen are in bushes. They were moving. Everybody laughed. And I think it was a wonderful. Well, and I went on, but I went up the bum and things like that. I just went on and on and on.
Keris as well. There was a bit of a love story between her and Mark. I remember that.
And none of us knew, because Mark was the nicest man I've ever met. He was just fantastic, handsome, gorgeous, but none of us knew they were having a bit of a thing.
Because they're both in relationships.
Yes. And his girlfriend came storming over from London to Australia to say, tell him.
Gosh. Did you see any tensions between them?
No, never. They were very clever.
What was your favourite trial? Because I know what my favourite to watch you do, but what was yours?
My favourite trial was the famous one at the end, when you have, I can't remember, it's called something now, where you have to start off and you have stars and you have to go up this sort of slight mountain and there's water cascading down and they throw pellets and what have you at
Cyclone.
you. The cycle. Oh, I can't tell you. And I was the first to go. And the awful Janice Dickinson, the American model who I hated, was vile. And I could see her I got my 5 stars down first, and then I looked around and she was coming up behind me and she looked like Gollum. And then that made me laugh. And I thought, and then she took 4 away and left. And then we were, at the end, they have this huge amount of water comes in. We were all thrown down. And it was the best thing. I just adored it. I loved it. But what was so interesting, because Janice Dickinson and I were in the final. And I was convinced that she'd won, as so was she convinced she'd won. And so we were there, and Antoinette was saying, and this year, and it went on and on and on. I was waiting for the name of the Queen of, and suddenly they went, the King of, and I went, I was so shocked. She was furious.
Really?
Oh, she was so furious. She left immediately and was driven to the airport. Such a bad loser.
Wow.
Oh, she was horrible.
She went back on the show in the All Stars, not last year, the year before.
I know. I don't know why they've got something about prostitutes or something.
She's not in your phone book then?
No, she certainly isn't. She's very keen to do this show, though.
Yeah, I can't believe that with Janice.
Yeah.
I really can. I thought she was a bit more of a team player. No.
Oh, no, she didn't do a thing. She didn't do a thing. Any trial, she just wouldn't do it. I mean, when I first met her, she came in late. I came in late. And I liked her. I thought she was great fun. And we did this trial together, and she didn't do anything. It was live. And I was doing it all. I was covered in ants and poo, and oh, God, it was funny. She did nothing.
We were talking earlier about Sean Wallace and the chase. And of course, you made history because you were the first person to take the higher offer and get all 6 questions correct.
Know.
I mean, that's a bit of a flex right there.
I was so thrilled because Bradley Walsh is an old friend of mine. I've known him for years and I adore him and I think he's so clever. So it was great to do the show. And then when I did that with Sean, and it was fantastic. And then we went on to do the final. Of course, we lost it all, which was a great shame. But there's those, I love Tipping Point with Ben Douglas. Ben Shepherd, thank you, Ben Shepherd, and I won that. I won £20,000 for my charity for that, and they're great shows. I love doing all of those. They're marvelous.
One thing I want to talk about is we obviously know you, and you're a big supporter of, especially in the early days, gay rights. And we know you as a very happily, openly gay man. But you were married to a woman previous, in the 70s. So I wanted to talk because obviously I'm 30, and I'm very lucky in where we live now in a day and age that I've had no issues. I've been very lucky that I can be me and very happy and live my life. But for you, did you feel like you had to be in a relationship with a woman for any particular reason?
No, I mean, the reason I married B. Aston, who lives in Australia, was she was a great friend of Willie Rushton's. Now, you won't know Willie Rushton. No. Willie Rushton was a real raconteur, very funny comedian, brilliant man, and very witty and everything. And she was Australian, and to get her to stay in this country, she needed to get married. So I married her.
Really?
Yeah.
So it wasn't, did she know that you were gay? Wow.
So I did it for her to be able to stay in England. And then she was able to work here. But going back to the gay thing is, there were real problems. If you worked in television, especially children's television, and you were gay, you were considered to be a paedophile. Yeah. And there were so many restrictions that you couldn't go around screaming it. But I've never hidden it. I've always been Biggins. I've always been me. And I'm very proud of that. But there were certain really bad problems that you had if you were gay. And then, of course, AIDS came along. And suddenly all gay people were murderers because people were dying because of sexual activity. And it was a really terrible time. And thankfully, people like Princess Diana did so much to help by going and holding people with AIDS hands. I mean, she was inspirational. And luckily, I got to know her really well. But, it was extraordinary at that particular time. It was terrifying. I mean, I did a series called, we talked about Rent-A-Ghost, Michael Staniforth, and he was one of the first people I know died of AIDS. And then everybody, I mean, you know, all your friends were dying, and it was absolutely hideous. Just the worst time ever.
Do you still keep in touch with Beatrice?
No, and I tell you what happened. She went back to Australia, and then the press got hold of it. She was Australian, and they stood on her doorstep and made it really bad for her. And so the answer is I don't. And I'm not sure, but I think she may have passed away. But she was a very good friend. In fact, we met when the two of us played Jumblies in The Owl and the Pussycat Went to Sea, as I told you earlier, SEE. And I played head Jumbly and she played Jumbly Girl. And we were in love. And she was the most lovely girl too. She was fabulous. So it was something just to help her, really.
Well, you've never actually, to my knowledge, come out. Like you said, you've just been Biggins. You've not said it, essentially.
No, and do you know what's interesting too? My parents who loved me, I loved them. If I have a sense of humour, it's definitely from my mother and my father. But I never sat down and talked to them and said, by the way, I'm gay. It never, I think I was too lower middle class to say it. And they would come and stay with me with boyfriends, and we slept in the same bed, and they must have known, but it was never spoken. You know, I never said, by the way, this is what we do or anything like that. It wasn't necessary. And I think that was good, because I think there's a pressure put on parents sometimes. I mean, I know lots of people who are gay, who their parents adore the fact they're gay, especially mothers. I mean, it means they never lose their son or their daughter, whatever. But luckily it's changed. And of course, now everybody's gay. You have to be gay to work in television.
There's hope for me, yeah.
Oh, definitely, Lewis.
One, you just mentioned Princess Diana. Now, I adore her, absolutely everything about her. And, I don't remember, I was only 2-3 years old when she passed away. So I watched The Crown, which I know is a dramatised, and a lot of it is fiction. But just some of the, I don't know if you've watched it yourself, but some of the scenes that involve Princess Diana, she seems like the most incredible human. So what were your memories with Diana?
Well, I think you've got to remember too, you go back to the initial relationship with Charles and Camilla and the wedding and everything like that. Diana made many mistakes, but the major mistake she made, and it was only one to begin with, she fell in love with her husband. No one, and there should have been the Queen Mother, her own aunt, they should have all got together and told her, this is not a love match. This is for you to provide heirs for the next generation. No one ever did. And so she fell in love with Charles. And I think, obviously, he had a love for her. But Camilla, sending messages on their wedding night and gifts to him. I mean, in a good world, the Queen should have allowed her to hang on, I get this right, should allow Charles to marry Camilla. But she was a divorcee, and it just didn't work for the church. And Princess Margaret should have married Townsend. Yeah. There were so many things that the royal family did wrong. And it's a shame because, I'm a great royalist. I met the Queen many times. I adored the royal family. I think Charles is doing a marvellous job. I think Camilla's doing a wonderful job. But Diana was extraordinary, and I met her many, many times. One of the times I'll always remember is I have a great friend called Liza Minnelli. Do you know Liza Minnelli?
Yes. Oh, my goodness.
And she was desperate to come on this show. And Liza rang me and said, look, I've got a friend coming tonight to see the show. She was doing a show at the Albert Hall, which was a brilliant show. And she said, will you take her? So I said, yes. So I went to the dressing room at the Albert Hall, and we were having a laugh and a glass of champagne and enjoying ourselves. And the door knocked on the door, and I went and opened the door, and there was Princess Diana, my date. I had no idea it was her. So we met and we had a glass of champagne and we laughed and what have you. And then we were told to go to the side, taken to the side of the auditorium. And they said, when the lights go down, you go into those 2 seats on the front row. So we were standing there and I said, Mum, I've just seen that wonderful picture of you on Britannia. And you're kneeling, holding your arms out, and your 2 boys are running towards you. I said, it's the most magnificent picture. She said, well, thank you so much for saying that because they're the most important things in my life. And I was quite taken aback by that. It was quite something that she should say that, but it was true. And I think now it's so sad that those boys aren't talking. And I hope to God that they do get back together again, because I think they did love each other, William and Harry. And I think that they went, that death of their mother was terrifying. The way they made those boys walk behind the coffin through London was awful.
At such a young age as well.
And especially Harry. And I think, people don't forget things like that, which is such a shame because they were, I do believe that Harry and William were really, really close. And I hope that they can be brought back together again.
As a royalist, what are your thoughts on Meghan? Because that seems a big divide.
Well, I liked Meghan. I mean, I thought she was great. And I think if you remember, when she went to all different places in England, like I think she went to Liverpool or somewhere, the crowds loved her.
Yeah.
And I think and my theory is that the problem with those 2 boys is their courts. There's the court of William and there's the court of Harry. And they're the ones that are stirring everything up. They're saying, this is, look what he did yesterday. Look what William did. And, William is going to be king. And Harry's not. And so it's a terrible situation. But I think he's realized, and I think he realized that he wanted to get married. He had they have 2 wonderful children. What her thing is, we don't know. We won't know for a long time. But he had to earn enough money to keep those children together. And of course, the book was a little too over the top.
Agreed. This leads me to my next question. Why on earth am I not sitting here saying Sir Christopher Biggins? Because you must get this a lot, and it does seem very overdue. I mean, are you not slightly surprised that you've not had that yet?
Well, no. I mean, it would be a lovely honour. An OBE or an MBE would be very nice. But, I think it's who you know, which happens with all these people. And I know
a lot of people we've covered.
I know, but I don't know a lot of people who give out the honours. Do you know anybody? Could you give me a few names?
Shane could probably organise it for you.
No. Thanks, Shane. But, it would be wonderful. And I would have loved it to have happened when my parents were still alive. I mean, the wonderful thing that almost as great as getting an award from the King or the Queen was doing This Is Your Life, which my parents were both there and they were absolutely thrilled by. And that was the sort of theatrical accolade which I got. So I'm nearly there. But, it's not, it is a thing of knowing the right people and being in the right place at the right time. Like I say of actors, actors come for me for advice and I say, don't do it. Because I tell them, I know so many actors who don't ever get the opportunity, who are brilliant. And they die never getting the parts they should get. I said, however, if you really want to do it, persevere. And one day you might, because it's being at the right place at the right time and knowing the right person.
Wow, we're going to test you now a little bit with the Big Biggins quiz, which is all about, of course, you.
Right.
Just before we start this, how come we've not seen you on Strictly yet? Because that would be a dream.
Yeah.
And I know you must have been asked.
I have been asked, but listen, this whole controversy over Strictly Come Dancing really annoys me because it is a really tough gig. You have to go in, you have to work hard, you have to practice, you have to really up your game. Well, I'm too lazy for that. I'm too old. I've got a new knee, which is, and was agony. I've had a new heart, not a new heart, I've had a new valve put in my heart. I'd probably die doing it, which was what BBC would like. I couldn't possibly do it, but it's thrilling you should mention that. And I do think now that I know a lot of girls who, I'm not going to mention any names, who've done that show, and they go in and the partner is, and I know all those boys and girls who are they're brilliant. And they say at 10 o'clock, I must go to get a coffee. 12 o'clock, I got to go and pick up my child. They are lazy like me and they don't want to do the work. And I think a lot of them perhaps fall in love with people and it's not reciprocated. I get really angry. It is a tough gig. And the people who succeed in it are brilliant dancers. And that's why no, I won't do it.
So we could rule out Dancing on Ice.
Dancing on Ice, I was a judge on the tour.
Yes, you were.
And Chris and Jane, I adore. But I mean, one day Jane was dancing with Chris on the ice, and she caught her thumb in the belt, and the thumb went back there. Oh. And people used to come off with fingers cut off. It's the most... Ooh. But I'll never forget that girl from Essex.
Joan Collins.
When she fell, it's probably the funniest thing I've ever seen. I mean, it was just wonderful.
So the big
either of those.
Quiz. Here we go. This is all about you now.
Oh, right, the quiz.
So what was the name of the character in Bad Girls that you were going to invite to live with you when she came out of prison?
Oh, God, I just cannot remember. Isn't that terrible?
Bookie Lester.
Oh, Bookie Lester, my Bookie, of course.
You starred as yourself in Psychoville, but how many episodes did you appear in?
3.
4.
4?
It was 4.
Do you remember the one with the dwarfs?
That's such a funny show.
Oh, God.
Steve Pemberton.
Absolutely. The two of them are brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
You played the role of Porky Prescott in what?
Oh, I think it was a sex film, and it had, I think Joanna Lumley was in it, but anyway, it was called Sex Thief.
Yes, there we go. You starred, as we spoke about, as Nero in I, Claudius. In what year?
Right. I can probably tell this. Hang on. 76.
Yes, 2 was smashing it. How many episodes of Poldark did you appear in?
8.
Yes. You're doing really well. Okay, this is shocking me. You appeared in Minder, but what was the name of your character?
I can't remember. I know that he was a tailor.
Think of Steptoe and Son. Well, one of the names.
Hang on. You mean the character's name?
The character's name.
Oh, I can't remember.
Harold.
What was it?
Harold.
Harold, right. No.
How many episodes of Countdown have you appeared on?
Right. Are we talking about a week, or are we talking about 5 in a week?
So it's in total.
In total. I would say 20.
Yes. And you're doing really well.
And I'm just about to do a Christmas special of Countdown.
This is going to be 21. How many Bush Tucker trials did you do?
6.
4.
Oh, right.
4. In what year were you the subject of This Is Your Life?
Oh, dear. I have a feeling it was 76.
Much later. Have you had it twice?
No. 86.
99.
Was it 99?
That's what you confused me then. I thought, he must have had it again.
No, I can't believe it was that late. 99.
How many appearances on The Brilliant Loose Women have you been on?
Oh,
and there's a lot.
Dear, oh dear, oh dear. I know that I got a special mug for being so many. I would say 20.
47.
47?
You've been on there a lot.
Good heavens.
What's next for you now? What can we expect from you? Because obviously we spoke a little bit about Panto, and I know Panto is a big love of yours. You have this natural way with an audience, and it just works. So can we expect more of that?
Yeah, well, I'm doing Sleeping Beauty at Woking. And I don't know what I'm playing, but this time, as I said earlier, when I did the Man in the Mirror, I flew in and out on a mirror. This year, I'm flying in and out on a star. But I don't know what my character's called, but it's Sleeping Beauty. And Faye Towser, do you know Faye Towser?
She's coming here.
Oh, well, I've never met her, but I hear she's gorgeous, and she's playing the lead with me in that, and Sooty.
Oh, wow, bit of a legend.
Yes. I tell you, we must have up here is Basil Brush. Do you know Basil?
Yes.
Would you like Basil?
We would love Basil.
Good.
So
Well,
that'll be
I'll
something
organise that
different.
for you.
What else though? Because you're always doing something and you're being asked.
Yeah. So I've just been doing the Edinburgh Festival, the Fringe, which I love doing at Prestonfield House. We have our own venue there, and it was very successful this year, I'm pleased to say. I'm here in Cornwall. I then go on the Queen Mary. I do talks on the Queen Mary, and I'm doing a new one on that. And then I'm doing Countdown. I'm doing various festivals, giving chats, talks to, and then the pantomime, and I think there's something else. But it's very busy and it's very exciting.
Christopher Biggins, you've honestly given me one of my interviews of my career. So thank you so much, Christopher Biggins. Thank you so much.